He had fame. He had fortune. He had an Oscar nomination. But at 31 years old, Robert Downey Jr. was driving down Sunset Boulevard, high on heroin, a .357 Magnum in his lap, and absolutely no idea how close he was to losing it all. A golden life tainted early. In the early 90s, Robert Downey Jr. was on top of the world. Critics called him one of the most talented actors of his generation. His portrayal of Charlie Chaplin in Chaplin had earned him an Academy Award nomination at just 27. He was charming, handsome, and unpredictable, a Hollywood darling. But few people knew that Downey's demons ran deep. His father, Robert Downey Sr., was a well-known underground filmmaker in the 60s and 70s, and also the man who introduced his son to drugs at age 6. In later interviews, Downey Jr. would say that doing drugs with his dad became the bond between us, something no child should ever say. By his 20s, he was using cocaine, heroin, and alcohol daily. But in Hollywood, talent sometimes buys you time. And so, the studios looked the other way, until June 23, 1996. The arrest, June 23, 1996. It was late on a Sunday night. Robert was cruising through Malibu in his black Ford pickup truck, high out of his mind. A police officer clocked him speeding down the Pacific Coast Highway, weaving between lanes, drifting. The truck finally came to a stop. What they found shocked even the jaded Malibu PD. Cocaine, black tar heroin, crack cocaine for smoking pipes, and an unloaded .357 Magnum handgun sitting in the passenger seat. Downey's pupils were dilated. His speech was slurred. He was arrested on the spot for felony drug possession, carrying a concealed weapon, and driving under the influence. When the news broke, the entertainment world was stunned. How could Robert Downey Jr., Hollywood's boy genius, be riding around with a gun and enough heroin to kill himself 10 times over? The mugshot that shattered his image. Downey's mugshot from that night would haunt him for years. Hollow eyes, a dazed smile. His black suit coat hung loosely over his slumped frame. Tabloids ran with the story. Chaplin star in heroin horror. Robert Downey Jr. arrested with loaded gun. Hollywood addict or tragic genius. But what no one expected was what happened just 4 weeks later. The incident that would turn Downey from trouble to terrifying in the eyes of the public. July 1996. The child's bed incident. Downey had been granted probation after his arrest. The court offered him a rare opportunity. Go to rehab, stay clean, avoid prison. But addiction doesn't care about second chances. One night in July 1996, Robert Downey Jr. got high. Again. But this time, the consequences would be even more bizarre and even more disturbing. At around 4:30 a.m., a family in Malibu found something horrifying. Their 11-year-old son walked into his bedroom and found a grown man passed out in his bed. That man was Robert Downey Jr. He had wandered into the wrong house, climbed into the child's bed, and passed out. He was completely unresponsive. It wasn't just trespassing. It was terrifying. The family called police, who took Downey into custody. Again. Courtroom chaos. The judges lose patience. This time, judges were no longer lenient. Downey had violated his probation within a month. He was ordered to spend 180 days in Los Angeles County Jail. Inside, Downey was reportedly a model inmate, polite, withdrawn, and quiet. But the media frenzy around the case had hit a boiling point. Parents, tabloids, and industry insiders were asking, how many chances does Robert Downey Jr. get? What if that had been your child's bed? Is Hollywood protecting a junkie because he's famous? But behind the scenes, Downey was crumbling. His addiction had consumed every part of his life. He was estranged from his wife. His acting gigs had dried up. Yet nothing, not arrests, not jail, not court-ordered rehab, could stop him from using. Media turns cold. 1996 marked a sharp turn in how the media treated Downey. He was no longer the troubled genius. He was now the reckless addict. Talk shows debated his downfall. Fans were split between sympathy and disgust. In a rare 1999 interview later, Downey would reflect on this period and say, "It's like I have a shotgun in my mouth, and I like the taste of metal. But in 1996, there were no clever quotes, just a man spiraling toward death, and no one sure whether he could be saved. Cliffhanger ending. Robert Downey Jr. had just been found in a child's bed, high on heroin, out of his mind. The court gave him jail time, but the world gave up hope. What happened next would test every limit of survival, legality, and redemption. By mid-1996, Robert Downey Jr. had been arrested with heroin, a handgun, and passed out in a stranger's child's bed. Judges were done being patient. Hollywood was done being quiet. But the most shocking part? He still hadn't hit rock bottom. The spiral continues. After the July 1996 incident, Downey was sentenced to 180 days in Los Angeles County Jail. It was the wake-up call everyone thought he needed. But the truth? Robert Downey Jr. wasn't even close to waking up. Just weeks after his release, he was using again heroin, cocaine, prescription pills. His addiction had become a full-time force. Rehab didn't work. Jail didn't scare him. And Hollywood was starting to look away. He wasn't just throwing away a career. He was throwing away his life. Probation violations, one after another. The courts tried to give him structure. They handed down strict probation conditions, regular drug testing, mandatory rehab attendance, weekly check-ins with a court officer. But Downey couldn't stay clean for more than a few weeks at a time. In late 1996, he missed a drug test, then another, then he skipped rehab sessions. Then he disappeared entirely for a while, holed up in a bungalow in Los Angeles, strung out and unreachable. Probation officers filed violation reports. Judges issued warnings. But every time he appeared in court, there was this odd combination of celebrity sympathy and judicial frustration. One judge told him to his face, "You're in a revolving door of drug abuse, Mr. Downey, and that door is going to slam shut." It nearly did. The almost overdose. Behind the scenes, things were even worse. In early 1997, Robert was reportedly found unconscious in a Los Angeles hotel, collapsed unresponsive, surrounded by needles and foil. He refused to go to the hospital. No ambulance. No rehab. The incident was never officially confirmed by police, but whispers about it leaked fast, from publicists, from hotel staff, from people who had watched him crash harder than ever before. Hollywood tabloids ran headlines like, "Robert Downey Jr. near death. Again, how many chances does he get?" From Oscar nominee to walking tragedy. But for Downey, it was just another low, not the last. The Hollywood fallout. By now, no major studio would insure him. Directors who loved him couldn't hire him. Producers refused to put their money on a man who might not show up to set, or might show up high. He was fired from multiple projects, replaced in major roles at the last minute, blacklisted quietly by casting agents. Even indie filmmakers started saying, "He's too much of a liability." But he had supporters, people who believed he was sick, not evil. One of them was James Toback, who directed him in Two Girls and a Guy and kept trying to pull him back from the edge. Still, Downey was spiraling. In 1997, just a year after his initial arrest, he was once again back in court. And this time, the judge didn't care about celebrity. He said, "I'm going to send you somewhere you can't walk away from." Sentenced to state prison. In August 1999, after repeated probation violations and failing to remain sober, Robert Downey Jr. was sentenced to 3 years in California State Prison at Corcoran, a facility known for housing violent offenders. It was no celebrity holding cell. Inside those walls were murderers, gang leaders, and lifers. Downey, barely over 5 feet 8 inches and weighing under 150 pounds, was just another inmate. He later described it as, like being sent to a distant planet where you no longer exist. He spent over 400 days behind bars. There was no press access, no rehab spa, no early release. For the first time, the consequences were real, and so was the fear, media pressure, and public debate. By this point, the public was split. Some people saw him as a spoiled addict who had wasted dozens of chances. Others saw him as a broken man in desperate need of real help. Hollywood remained awkwardly silent. No one wanted to speak up. His name had become radioactive. Studios whispered about potential, but wrote him off as lost. How far does celebrity have to fall before they're no longer famous? Just another inmate. Downey reflects years later. Years later, Downey would admit, when someone's addicted, there's only so much you can say. They don't care about consequences. I didn't care if I lived or died. But in 1996 to 1999, that wasn't clear. To most people watching, it looked like a slow-motion suicide. Final scene, prison yard and a letter. One prison guard later told a journalist that he often saw Downey pacing the yard alone, silent, staring at the ground. Inmates left him alone, not because of fame, but because they thought he wouldn't last long enough to matter. He received letters from fans. But there was one letter from his son that broke him. He never revealed exactly what it said. But when asked, he simply said, "That letter, that was when I knew I was done." Robert Downey Jr. had spent over a year in one of California's toughest prisons. He was broken, forgotten, and no one believed he'd ever return to Hollywood. But what happened next would become one of the most shocking turnarounds in entertainment history. By the year 2000, Robert Downey Jr. had become a ghost of himself. A former Oscar-nominated actor, now buried inside a California prison. Addicted, alone, forgotten. No one thought he'd make it out alive, let alone become the face of the most powerful film franchise in history. Prison release, but freedom didn't mean redemption. After 15 months behind bars, Downey was released from California Substance Abuse Treatment Facility and state prison in August 2000. He walked out wearing standard-issue jeans and a blank stare, his once boyish face now worn and serious. The media barely covered it. Hollywood didn't call. His family hoped, but didn't believe it would be different this time. And at first it wasn't. Within 8 months, Robert was arrested again. This time, he was found wandering the streets of Culver City, high on drugs. People stopped seeing him as a troubled celebrity. He was now just an addict. A cautionary tale. A Hollywood, what could have been. Divorce, unemployment, and a fading pulse. His wife, Deborah Faulconer, finally filed for divorce. Studios blacklisted him completely. Even indie filmmakers wouldn't touch his name. He was so unreliable, he had to pay for his own insurance on film sets, something virtually unheard of in Hollywood. He was broke, both emotionally and financially. Downey himself admitted, "It was like I was watching myself die in slow motion." But in 2003, something shifted. Two things happened that would change his life forever. Enter Susan Levin, the woman who drew the line. During the filming of a small-budget movie called Gothica, Downey met Susan Levin, a sharp, focused film executive. They began dating, but Susan had rules. "If you don't get clean, I'm gone." That was it. No drama. No second chances. Just the truth. For the first time, Downey had a reason bigger than himself to fight. And so he did. He checked into rehab. He cut off old dealers. He went to therapy. And this time, it stuck. The call that changed everything. By 2005, Downey was sober, but still untouchable in Hollywood. That's when an unexpected believer came knocking. Jon Favreau, the director of a risky new superhero film called Iron Man, believed Downey was the only person crazy enough, brilliant enough, and real enough to play Tony Stark. But Marvel said no. He's a liability. He's uninsurable. He'll ruin the film. Favreau fought back. Tony Stark is Robert Downey Jr. That's the whole point. And Marvel finally agreed, on one condition. Downey had to pay for his own insurance and sign multiple behavioral clauses. He did. And then he delivered one of the most iconic performances in film history. The birth of Iron Man and a legend reborn. Iron Man released in 2008 and changed cinema forever. It earned over $580 million worldwide and launched the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Now the most successful film franchise of all time. Robert Downey Jr. didn't just act the role of Tony Stark. He was Tony Stark, a man with demons, arrogance, genius, and a battered soul clawing his way back from the edge. Critics raved. Fans forgave. Studios begged him to return. And this time he didn't fall. The final transformation. Robert married Susan Levin. He stayed sober. He helped other actors struggling with addiction. He returned to award shows not as a washed-up star, but as a multi-million-dollar powerhouse. Between 2008 and 2019, he starred in The Avengers, Sherlock Holmes, Civil War, Endgame, the highest-grossing film of all time at the time. His net worth soared to $300 million. He went from being found in a child's bed high on heroin to saving the world on screen, a lesson from the abyss. Some people fall and never get back up. Others fall 100 times and keep crawling until they rise. Robert Downey Jr. is proof that addiction doesn't care about talent, and recovery doesn't care about fame. It takes hitting rock bottom, being stripped of everything, and most importantly, having one reason to live bigger than your reason to die. Whether the child, a partner, or a purpose, recovery starts with one honest choice, and 100 brutal days after that. Downey later said, "I don't drink. I don't use drugs. Life is too good." But it took nearly dying multiple times to finally see it. From jail cells to red carpets, from heroin to heroes, Robert Downey Jr.'s story isn't just about addiction. It's about redemption. It's about fighting for your life when everyone else gives up. Because sometimes the most powerful comeback is the one no one saw coming.